I stood in the doorway of the community center, still wearing my coat. The music was soft, the lights were dim, and there, in the middle of the dance floor, was my husband. He was smiling, his hand was on her waist, her hand was on his shoulder. They swayed gently to the music, like they'd done this 100 times before. She was younger than me, maybe in her early 40s. She wore a deep red dress that fit her perfectly. Her hair was curled, her laugh was light and easy. And my husband, Richard, he looked at her the way he used to look at me. I felt my chest tighten. My hands went cold. I wanted to turn around, walk out, pretend I'd never seen it, but I didn't. Because earlier that day, I'd overheard him on the phone, and what he'd said made my heart stop. "Meet me at 10, he'd told her. "Save me a dance." I thought I knew my husband. I thought I knew our marriage. But standing there, watching him hold another woman, I realized I didn't know anything at all. Or maybe I'd known all along, and I just didn't want to see it. My name is Eleanor. I'm 62 years old. I've been married to Richard for 38 years. We met when I was 24. He was 26. I was working as a librarian in a small town in Connecticut. He came in one rainy afternoon looking for a book on woodworking. We started talking, he asked me to dinner, and 6 months later we were married. Richard was a good man, steady, reliable. He worked as a contractor, building homes, fixing things with his hands. He wasn't the most romantic person. He didn't write me love letters or surprise me with flowers, but he was there, every day, every year. We raised 2 daughters together, both grown now with families of their own. We had a quiet life, a simple life. We went to church on Sundays, we had dinner together most nights, we watched old movies on the weekends. But somewhere along the way, things changed. I'm not sure when it started. Maybe it was after the girls left. Maybe it was after Richard retired. Maybe it had been happening slowly for years and I just didn't notice. We stopped talking as much. We stopped laughing together. We moved through our days like roommates, not like husband and wife. I tried. I really did. I suggested date nights. I asked him to take walks with me. I tried to bring back the warmth we used to have. But Richard was distant, distracted, always busy with something. A project in the garage, a meeting at the community center, a favor for a friend. And then, 3 months ago, he joined a dance class. At first, I thought it was wonderful. He said he wanted to stay active, keep moving, meet new people. I even encouraged him. "That's great, Richard," I said. "You should go, have fun." He went every Tuesday and Thursday evening, and every time he came home, he seemed lighter, happier, more alive than I'd seen him in years. I was glad. I really was. But I also felt left behind. He never asked me to join him, never suggested we take the class together. It was his thing, his world, and I wasn't part of it. Then, last week, I was folding laundry in the bedroom. Richard was in the living room, talking on the phone. His voice was low, but I could hear him through the door. "I'll see you Tuesday," he said. And then he laughed. A soft, warm laugh I hadn't heard in a long time. "Yeah, meet me at 10. Save me a dance." I froze. My hands stopped moving. My heart started pounding. Save me a dance. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe it was just a friend, someone from the class, something innocent. But something in his voice, it didn't sound innocent. I didn't say anything to him that night or the next day. I just watched, waited, and tried to push the doubt out of my mind. But it didn't go away. On Tuesday, Richard got ready for his dance class like always. He showered, put on cologne, wore his nicest shirt, a dark blue button-down I'd bought him last Christmas. "You look nice," I said quietly. "Thanks," he said, barely looking at me. "I'll be back around 11. "Okay." He kissed me on the forehead, a quick, automatic gesture, and then he left. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the door he'd just walked through. And then I made a decision. I was going to follow him. I waited 10 minutes after Richard left. Then I grabbed my coat, my purse, and my car keys. My hands were shaking. My heart was racing. I felt like I was doing something terrible, like I was betraying him by not trusting him. But I had to know. The community center was only 15 minutes away. I'd been there before for potlucks, charity events, town meetings. It was a familiar place, safe, normal. But tonight, it felt different. I parked across the street, in the shadows where my car wouldn't be noticed. I could see the main entrance. People were walking in, mostly older couples, some alone, everyone dressed nicely. I saw Richard's truck in the parking lot. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. Part of me wanted to turn around, go home, pretend I'd never doubted him, but I couldn't. I got out of the car and walked slowly toward the entrance. The music was already playing inside. I could hear it through the doors, something slow, jazzy. I opened the door quietly and stepped inside. The main hall was decorated with soft string lights. There were small tables along the edges, each with a candle in the center. The dance floor was in the middle, and about 20 people were already dancing. I stayed near the back, by the coat rack, where the lights were dimmer. I scanned the room, looking for Richard. And then I saw him. He was standing near the refreshment table, talking to a woman. She had dark hair, pulled back into a low bun. She wore a red dress that hugged her figure. She was laughing at something he said. And Richard, he was smiling, really smiling, the kind of smile I hadn't seen in years. My stomach twisted. I watched as she touched his arm, just lightly, just for a second, but it was enough. Richard said something, and she nodded. Then he took her hand and led her onto the dance floor. I felt like I couldn't breathe. The music shifted to something slower, a classic ballad. Frank Sinatra, I think. Richard put his hand on her waist. She put her hand on his shoulder, and they started to dance. He held her gently, respectfully, but there was something in the way he looked at her, something soft, something familiar. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. They moved together easily, like they'd done this before, like they knew each other's rhythm. She said something, and he laughed, a real laugh, deep and genuine. When was the last time I'd made him laugh like that? I felt tears prick my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Not yet. I stood there, frozen, watching my husband dance with another woman, watching him be happy, watching him be the man I used to know. And I wondered, when did I lose him? The song ended. They stopped dancing, but they didn't step apart right away. They stood there for a moment, still holding hands, still smiling at each other. And then she leaned in and whispered something in his ear. Richard's face changed, just slightly. He looked surprised, maybe a little nervous. He glanced around the room, like he was checking to see if anyone was watching. My heart pounded. And then he nodded. She took her hand again, and they walked toward the side exit, the one that led to the back patio. I didn't think. I just moved. I followed them, quietly, carefully, keeping my distance. They stepped outside into the cool night air. The patio was empty, just a few benches and some potted plants. The music from inside was muffled now. I stayed by the door, hidden in the shadows, watching through the glass. Richard and the woman stood close together. Too close. She was talking, he was listening. His hands were in his pockets, his shoulders were tense. And then she reached up and touched his face. My breath caught. He didn't pull away. She leaned in closer, and for a moment I thought she was going to kiss him. But she didn't. Instead, she said something that made Richard close his eyes, something that made his shoulders drop. And then he nodded, slowly, like he was agreeing to something. I couldn't take it anymore. I pushed open the door and stepped outside. "Richard," I said. His head snapped toward me, his eyes went wide. "Eleanor," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "What are you doing here?" The woman stepped back quickly. She looked at me, then at Richard, then at me. "I could ask you the same thing," I said quietly. My voice was shaking, but I kept it steady. Richard ran a hand through his hair. "It's not what you think." "Isn't it?" I said. I looked at the woman. "Who are you?" She opened her mouth to speak, but Richard cut her off. "Eleanor, please, let me explain." "Then explain. Explain why you're out here, alone, with her." He looked at the woman. She nodded slightly, like she was giving him permission. And then Richard took a deep breath. "Her name is Susan. She's my dance partner." "I can see that," I said coldly. "No, I mean, she's been helping me, teaching me." "Teaching you what?" I asked. He hesitated, and then, quietly, he said, "How to dance with you." I blinked.
What?
Richard stepped closer to me. His face looked pained, embarrassed. "I've been taking these classes," he said slowly, "because I wanted to learn how to dance, really dance, the way you always wanted me to." I stared at him, confused. "What are you talking about?" He sighed. "Eleanor, do you remember our wedding? How we had our first dance and I stepped on your feet 3 times?" I remembered. Of course I remembered. I'd laughed it off, told him it didn't matter. "You said it was fine," Richard continued, "but I saw your face. You were disappointed, and I've carried that with me ever since." "Richard." "And then," he said, his voice getting softer, "do you remember our 10th anniversary, when we went to that restaurant with the live band? You asked me to dance, and I said no because I was embarrassed, because I didn't know how." I did remember. I'd tried to hide my hurt, but he'd seen it anyway. "I've watched you at weddings," Richard said, "at parties, at events. I've seen the way you look at the couples dancing, the way you tap your foot to the music, the way you smile when someone asks you to dance, and then you have to say no because I won't go with you." My throat tightened. "So 3 months ago," he said, "I signed up for dance lessons. I didn't tell you because I wanted it to be a surprise. I wanted to get good enough that I could actually take you dancing, really dancing, the way you've always wanted." I looked at Susan. She gave me a small, gentle smile. "He's been working so hard," she said softly. "He practices every week. He wanted to be ready for your anniversary." "Our anniversary?" I repeated. Richard nodded. "It's in 2 weeks. 40 years, Eleanor. I wanted to do something special. I booked a table at the Carlton Hotel. They have a ballroom, a live orchestra, and I was going to ask you to dance. And this time, I wouldn't step on your feet." I felt tears spill down my cheeks. "I wanted to surprise you," Richard said, his voice breaking. I wanted to make up for all the times I said no, all the times I made you feel like I didn't care. Because I do care. I've always cared. I didn't know how to show it. Susan stepped back quietly. "I'll give you two some privacy," she said, and she slipped back inside. Richard and I stood there, alone on the patio. The night air was cool. The music from inside was faint. I wiped my eyes. "You've been learning to dance? For me?" "For us," he said. I looked at him, really looked at him, at the man I'd been married to for 38 years, the man I thought I'd lost. "Why didn't you just ask me to take the class with you?" I asked. "Because I wanted to be good enough first," he admitted. "I didn't want you to see me stumble, to see me mess up. I wanted to walk into that ballroom and sweep you off your feet, like I should have done 40 years ago." I let out a shaky breath. "Richard, I don't need you to be perfect. I never did." "I know," he said quietly, "but I needed to do this. For me, to prove to myself that I could still make you happy." "You do make me happy," I said, my voice breaking. "You always have. Even when you said no to dancing. Even when you were quiet and distant. I thought you didn't want me anymore." His eyes widened. "Eleanor, no. God, no. I've never stopped wanting you. I just didn't know how to say it. I'm not good with words. I'm not good with feelings. But I thought if I could learn to dance, maybe I could show you." I stepped closer to him. "You don't need to show me through dancing, Richard. You show me every day. When you fix the broken cabinet I've been complaining about. When you make coffee in the morning before I wake up. When you sit with me during those old movies, even though I know you'd rather be in the garage." He smiled a little. "You noticed that?" "Of course I noticed. I notice everything about you. I always have." Richard reached for my hand, slowly, carefully, like he was asking permission. I gave it to him. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm sorry I made you doubt me. I'm sorry I made you feel like you had to follow me here. I should have just told you the truth." "I'm sorry too," I said. "I should have trusted you. I should have asked instead of assuming the worst." We stood there, holding hands, looking at each other in the soft glow of the patio lights. And then Richard said, "Do you want to dance?" I blinked. "What?" "Right here," he said. "Right now. I know I'm not perfect yet, but I'd like to try, if you'll have me." I felt fresh tears welling up, but this time they weren't sad. "Yes," I whispered. "I'd love to." Richard pulled me gently into his arms, one hand on my waist, the other holding mine. We could still hear the music from inside. It was faint, but it was enough. And we danced. He moved carefully, slowly, counting the steps under his breath. And you know what? He didn't step on my feet, not once. I rested my head on his shoulder, and for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt close to him again. "I love you, Eleanor," he whispered. "I love you too," I said. We stayed like that for a long time, swaying together under the stars, just the two of us. And I realized something. It wasn't about the dancing. It never was. It was about him trying, about him caring enough to step out of his comfort zone, about him wanting to make me happy. And that was more than enough. Richard and I stayed on that patio for a while. We didn't talk much. We just held each other, swayed to the distant music, let the silence say what words couldn't. When we finally went back inside, Susan was sitting at one of the small tables, sipping a glass of water. She looked up when she saw us and smiled. I walked over to her. Richard stayed a few steps behind, giving me space. "Thank you," I said quietly. Susan stood up. "For what?" "For helping him," I said. "For being patient with him. For not being what I thought you were." She laughed softly. "I understand. I would have thought the same thing if I were you." I hesitated, then asked, "How long have you two been practicing?" "3 months," she said, "every Tuesday and Thursday. He's been a dedicated student. A little stiff at first, but he's come a long way." I glanced back at Richard. He looked embarrassed, but proud. "He talks about you, all the time. About how you met, about your daughters, about the life you've built together. He adores you, Eleanor. Anyone can see that." I felt my chest tighten again, but this time it wasn't from fear or doubt. It was from gratitude. "Thank you," I said again. "Really." Susan squeezed my hand gently. "You're welcome. And for what it's worth, I think you two are lucky to have each other." Richard and I left the community center shortly after. We didn't say much on the drive home, but he held my hand the whole way. When we got home, I made us tea. We sat together at the kitchen table, the way we used to when the girls were young and we'd stay up late talking about everything and nothing. "I ruined the surprise," I said softly. Richard shook his head. "No, I should have told you from the beginning. I wanted it to be perfect." It was perfect. Tonight was perfect. He smiled, a real, genuine smile. "You think so?" "I know so." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Richard said, "The reservation at the Carlton is still good, 2 weeks from Saturday, if you still want to go." "Of course I want to go. I wouldn't miss it." "Even though you already know the surprise?" I reached across the table and took his hand. "Richard, the surprise wasn't the dancing. It was knowing that you cared enough to try, that you wanted to make me happy. That's the part that matters." He squeezed my hand. "I do want to make you happy. I always have. I've just been bad at showing it." "Then let's both try harder. Not just you. Both of us. Let's talk more. Let's listen more. Let's stop assuming and start asking." He nodded. "I'd like that." Over the next 2 weeks, something shifted between us. We started having breakfast together every morning. We took evening walks around the neighborhood. We watched our old favorite movies and actually talked during them instead of sitting in silence. And Richard kept going to his dance classes, but this time he told me about them. He'd come home and show me what he'd learned. We'd practice together in the living room, laughing when we messed up, cheering when we got it right. It felt like we were dating again, like we were rediscovering each other. On the night of our anniversary, Richard picked me up at the door like we were going on a first date. He wore a dark suit. I wore a navy blue dress I'd been saving for something special. "You look beautiful," he said. "You look handsome," I replied. The Carlton Hotel was everything I'd imagined. The ballroom was elegant, with chandeliers and soft lighting. A live orchestra played on a small stage. Couples filled the dance floor, moving gracefully to the music. We had dinner first. Richard had chosen all my favorite dishes. We talked and laughed and remembered the early days of our marriage. And then, when the orchestra started playing a slow waltz, Richard stood up and extended his hand. "May I have this dance?" he asked. I smiled. "You may." He led me onto the dance floor, and this time there was no hesitation, no counting under his breath, no nervousness. He held me close. We moved together smoothly, naturally, like we'd been doing this our whole lives. "You've gotten good at this," I whispered. I had a good reason to learn. We danced through 3 songs, and the whole time I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt seen. I felt loved. I felt cherished. When we finally left the dance floor, Richard pulled me aside near the terrace doors. "There is one more thing," he said. "What?" He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. My heart skipped. He opened it. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a small charm in the shape of a dancing couple. "I know it's not much, but I wanted you to have something to remember tonight, to remember that I'm still trying, that I'll always try. For you." Tears filled my eyes as he fastened it around my wrist. "It's perfect," I whispered. He kissed my forehead. "Happy anniversary, Eleanor." That was 2 years ago. Richard and I still go dancing. Not every week, but often enough. Sometimes at the Carlton, sometimes at the community center, sometimes just in our living room when a good song comes on the radio. And every time we dance, I look down at the bracelet on my wrist, the little silver couple frozen mid-spin, reminding me of the night everything changed. We're not perfect. We still have quiet days. We still have moments where we don't quite understand each other. But the difference now is that we talk about it. We don't let the silence build walls between us anymore. Susan became a friend. She and her husband sometimes join us for dinner. And every time I see her, I'm reminded of how wrong I was that night. How quickly fear and doubt can twist something innocent into something dark. I'm grateful I showed up, grateful I didn't just run away, because if I had, I would have missed the truth. I would have missed seeing my husband's heart. I would have missed the gift he was trying to give me. Marriage isn't always easy. It takes work. It takes patience. It takes the willingness to see past your fears and trust the person you chose to spend your life with. And sometimes it takes a dance. Richard still isn't the most romantic man. He still spends too much time in the garage. He still forgets to put his coffee cup in the sink. But he tries. Every day, in his own quiet way, he tries. And that's all I've ever needed. So if you're listening to this tonight and you're in a relationship that feels distant, that feels cold, that feels like it's slipping away, don't give up. Not yet. Talk. Ask questions. Show up, even when it's hard, even when it's uncomfortable. Because sometimes the person you think is pulling away is actually just trying to find their way back to you. And sometimes all it takes is one dance to remember why you fell in love in the first place. I thought my husband was falling for someone else, but he was just falling for me all over again. And that's a gift I'll never take for granted.